Hello everyone and welcome to another incredible matchup of round 5 of this year's FIDE World Cup. It is Pentala Harikrishna versus José Martínez Alcantara, and both of them have defeated some incredible players getting here all the way to round 5, but now it's time to eliminate one another as it's time to go into the quarterfinals. And the first two classical games ended in a draw, then two rapid games ended in a draw, and this is now the third game of the tiebreaks of the rapids, or fifth game altogether. Let's check it out. It's quite a thrilling one. So Harikrishna with white opened with pawn to e4. We have c5, the Sicilian defense, knight f3, d6, and pawn to d4. Sorry about that. We have c captures on d4, knight captures, and knight to f6. We have knight c3, and here the most popular are the knight and the dragon, but we have knight to c6, the classical Sicilian. We have bishop to g5, countering with a Richter-Rauzer variation, and bishop to d7. Okay, the modern way of treating the Richter-Rauzer. We have knight captures on c6, and b captures on c6. You could also play bishop captures. I think it's even more common. Bishop to c4 and pawn to h6, attacking the bishop, and you could definitely capture on f6. It has been played quite a few times, but we have bishop back to d2, and now there are a couple of games where e5 was played. Here we have pawn to e6, and it is now as of move 9 that we have a completely new game. Okay, queen e2 by Harikrishna, and bishop to e7, pawn to e5. Destroying black's strong center, and while you would love to play pawn to d5, there are simply too many targets for that pawn once the capturing occurs. We have d captures on e5, queen captures, and the immediate queen to b8, forcing the queens off the board because there's really no way to avoid it. You're only choosing whether you want to trade on e5 or maybe queen g3, because you're also threatening on g7, and now you might castle, or maybe we even see castles, and then a queen trade, but very unlikely that anything other than a queen trade happens. So we have the immediate queen captures with check, rook captures, and the bishop to b3. Nicely defending the b2 pawn. We have pawn to c5, and castles queenside. Now you have to be a little bit careful. That bishop could be a target at some point. So bishop to c6, putting pressure on g2, and the bishop to a4. Again, forcing a trade. So seems Harikrishna wants to trade everything down and just enjoy the next game with the white pieces, as why wouldn't he? So bishop captures on a4, knight captures, and pawn to c4. We have bishop to f4, putting pressure on the rook, and rook to b7. Rook to d4, attacking the pawn on c4, and the knight to d5. Pushing the bishop back, we have bishop to d2, and rook to c7, with ideas of maybe pawn to c3 at some point. So bishop to a5, attacking the rook, and the rook to c6. We have knight back to c3, and now everything gets traded off. Bishop g5 check, king b1, bishop f6 forces the rook back, rook to d2, and now you start capturing. Bishop captures, we have bishop captures, knight captures, pawn captures, and king to e7. José Martínez says, I don't need to move away my king all the way to the king side and castle. I can just play king e7, keep my king in the center, and get the other rook into the attack. And black is just better here. There is no other way to put it. Equal material, but white has a double c pawn. So, okay, we have rook h to d1, rook to b8 with check. We have king to c1, rook to b7, so defending against rook to d7, rook to d4, and rook b to c7. Nicely doubling up, so you don't have to worry about ever losing that c pawn. And if black wants, black can always get a draw. The question is whether José Martínez wants to push this or not. We have rook to e1, rook to a6, putting pressure on a2, and rook e to e4. Now saying, okay, if you capture on a2, I'm just going to capture on c4. But there's no need to rush. Rook to a4. You keep the pawn defended, and if the white rooks move away from the fourth rank, then you're going to capture on a2. So pawn to g4, we have pawn to g5, and king to b2. We have pawn to f6 and pawn to a3. Rook to c6 with ideas of maybe getting the rook over to b6 with check, but also just doubling up and winning that a3 pawn. Rook to e3 and pawn to e5 now. Probably he was hoping, I guess, for rook to a6, then you can go for rook to h3, and all of a sudden it's very double-edged, but white should be perfectly fine. However, José Martínez says, nope, no need for that, just pawn to e5. rook e to e4. You don't have to move this rook as the pawn is pinned, and rook to c8. So you're ready to defend that pawn if you'll ever need it. We have rook to d5 and rook to a6. We have rook to b5. Now you don't have to worry about any checks along the b file. Rook to b6. Now José Martínez offers a trade of rooks, or rather forces it. We have rook to b4, saying, okay, if you want to trade, I want to trade as well, but I want to improve my pawn structure while I'm at it. King to e6 and king to c1. Nicely unpinning, we have rook b to c6 and rook to e3. Now with ideas of rook to h3, but also maybe just h4 captures and then rook h3, and then you try to make something happen along the 6th or 7th rank. So here, José Martínez plays pawn to h5. He's the one that opens up the h file. And the only way to play this for white is to play pawn to h3. And then after, let's say, trades on g4, rook to h8, you can play king to d2. And if black insists, then you can play king to e2, and your pawn is nicely defended. So this would hold. But after h5, g captures on h5 was played. And believe it or not, this is now winning for black, as black's pawn structure is just beautiful here on the king side. And that's all you need. So rook to h8, going after the h5 pawn, rook to h3 and king to f5. We have rook to b7 going after the a7 pawn, but that pawn is no longer relevant. We have king to g7, rook to g3 check, and king to f4. Of course, not king captures on h5. I hope none of you were considering that. So king f4 and rook captures on h7. Defending with rook h3 is really not all that impressive, just g4. And next you capture the pawn, or if this, then king g5 and your rook is trapped. So that's even worse. So after king f4, rook captures on a7, and now rook captures on h5. We have pawn to h3, pawn to f5, and pawn to a4. There's also a passed a pawn for you to worry about, so it's not that simple. And here we have rook h to h6. This move solves all of your problems because you can just play rook to a6, and that's perfectly fine. Because you guys are such connoisseurs, I will show you a beautiful line here that instead of going back, you can actually play rook c to h6 and double up on the h file. And while it is a race, it's a race that you're most certainly winning. But, 2 minutes on the clock, no reason to calculate for José Martínez. Rook captures, rook captures, rook captures, pawn to a6, and you can just play king f3, and there's nothing. Rook f7, you're going to play rook to h1 check, king to b2, f4, and now there's no way to do anything about that pawn. If pawn to a7, rook to h8, and then if rook to b7, hoping to get rook to b8, then you're just going to play rook to a8. And if you don't play that, not much for you to do. If rook to f8, hoping to get a7 in, just rook to h7. And there's no way for white to make progress. Now you just start pushing, and that's it. You easily win the game. But, okay, rook to h6, much more natural. You stop the pawn from ever touching a6, so you don't have to calculate. It's, in this particular situation, a better approach. But you always have to be careful. Maybe it's not winning. So king to d2, we have pawn to e4 and pawn to a5. We have rook to a6 by black, offering a rook trade, and of course you cannot accept. Unfortunately for Harikrishna, we have rook to f7 and rook captures on a5. We have king to e2, rook to h4 and rook to c7. We have rook to a2 going after the c2 pawn, and not a lot you can do about this. Rook captures on c4, rook captures on c2. We have king to f1 and pawn to g4. Just blasting through. We have h captures on g4, and now, believe it or not, only one interesting way to win the game. Rook h1 check, king to g2, and now only one move wins the game. Feel free to pause the video and win it for José Martínez while I give you a couple of seconds. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on being a true master of the end game and, being able to find mates in one. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook to c1. There's no defense against rook g1 checkmate, and that's pretty much it. One more move was made, or maybe two. Rook f3 check was played. King captures on g4, rook to g3 check, and now king h4. And he was in this position on move 59 that Harikrishna resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Rook c to g1 will be checkmate, And you could play f3 or f4, doesn't really matter. But here you have the beautiful rook c2 check. You give up a rook for the moment, and then after king captures on g3, there's no defense. Rook c1 is mate on the next move, unless you play some silly moves like rook captures, you block with check. Okay, so it's actually mate in 2, but realistically it's mate in 1. So yeah, beautifully done by José Martínez. The game 4 of the tiebreaks was a draw, and that means José Martínez wins the entire thing, wins the match against Harikrishna, and he goes into the quarterfinals of the FIDE World Cup. So he's one of the top 8, and one more win, and he's one of the top 4. That means that he's almost in the candidates tournament. But still, anyone can still qualify. Anyone can still, not qualify. So we're not gonna go there. But yeah, if you guys want to know all the results of round 5, here they are. Let me just make this a little bit larger. So Frederick Svane got eliminated by Javo Krisindarov. José Martínez eliminated Pentala Harikrishna. Nodirbek Yakuboev eliminated Gabriel Sargsyan. Liam Le actually lost Alexander Donchenko. Now I say actually because Liam Le was the favorite, of course, but yeah, Donchenko, the hopes of having more than one German in the candidates are still alive. Daniil Dubov got eliminated by Sam Shankland. We've seen that game. It was as if Shankland was sort of inhabited by the spirit of Dubov, playing against Dubov. I mean, watching that game, I felt like Dubov was having the white pieces, not Sam. But yeah, Sam is a great player, and he just gave Dubov no chances. In game 2, he only needed a draw. He eliminated any chances that Dubov had, got the queens off the board as early as move 6, I think, and just held him to an equal endgame. And Dubov tried, like he tried to pull even the silliest rabbit out of a hat, but there just weren't any. Andrei Espenko defeated Alexei Grebnev, and Wei Yi eliminated Sam Sevian. We've also shown that game. Arjun Erigaisi eliminated Levon Aronyan. And to make it official, here are the pairings for the quarterfinals. There you have it. Let me just make this a little bit smaller. Javo Krisindarov will face José Martínez, Nodirbek Yakuboev will face Alexander Donchenko, Sam Shankland will face Andrei Espenko, and Wei Yi will face Arjun Erigaisi. So really interesting pairings. It's possible that we get out of these 8, let's say, I'm not picking for any particular reason, but let's say José Martínez, let's say Donchenko, and let's say Sam Shankland into the candidates, and for example, Arjun and Wei Yi will not be qualified. Well, one of them, Wei Yi and Arjun, is definitely not qualifying. It's only a question of who. So yeah, that's really incredible. So we're gonna have a very, very interesting candidates tournament next year, and I'm very much excited for it. But yeah, very nicely done by José Martínez. Getting all the way this far, he eliminated Velimir Ivic, he defeated Nodirbek Abdusattorov, he defeated Alexis Sarana. Now he takes down Harikrishna, and we'll see if he can take it all the way. I mean, he defeated Vladimir Kramnik in a match. Obviously, he knows how to play chess. So yeah, really hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Yoon Young, Max Anderson, Udo Brandt, Eddie Sphere, and David Gasparian for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.